Some of you know me, some don't. I'm Dr. Cheryl Shea, and I'm a chiropractic physician. My office is in Kirkwood, Missouri, and I do chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, a lot of nutrition. I realized some years ago that our gut health and our gut was underlying many, many diseases. I heard a researcher share that every single autoimmune disease is caused by intestinal dysfunction and gut issues. And I realized that every child with autism and every child with ADHD, they had issues with gut health. And so I decided it was really very important for me to learn about gut health. So I am going to share my screen, so give me just a second. And so I labeled my talk as what does my gut have to do with it? Well, as I just briefly explained, our gut really has everything to do with almost every aspect of our health. And we're gonna cover quite a bit of just what I call GI foundations. And this particular talk is labeled Heal Your Gut, Heal Your Body. Now, for most of us, we might see a doctor if we have fatigue or stomach problems or cough or cold, hormone imbalances, blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, etc. Certainly pain. And yet most of the time we see a doctor, we really don't get to the root cause of things. We might walk away with a prescription or a supplement even that might minimize the symptoms, but getting to the root cause just doesn't usually happen. And one reason for that is, if you look here, really all of us, doctors and chiropractors, we are trained in these disconnected systems. We're trained in the circulatory system. We're trained in nervous system, skeletal system, respiratory. And, because of that, we all have what I call parts doctors. And we have, Lee, can you go ahead and mute yourself?
Oh, okay.
Thanks. We have a foot doctor, we have a gynecologist, we have a cardiologist, we have a neurologist. So we have a doctor for every part. And yet really everything is linked together. And doctors who are functional medicine doctors, and I am one, we realize there's an interconnecting web between everything and that everything is connected. And to be honest, our gastrointestinal system is the link. So we're gonna talk about that and really focus on that today. And we're going to show you how to get to the root cause of many symptoms or many diseases, really. Okay, and we do that by actually working on the gastrointestinal system. So let's start just a minute by talking about, how we fail our bodies. Well, eating the wrong foods is one thing. What are the wrong foods? Like the hydrogenated oils. And those are like Crisco and margarines, certainly. Eating processed or preserved foods that are excess in sugar, fat, and salt. And whether you realize it or not, most restaurants really add a lot of sugar, fat, and salt because things taste good then, and then we want to go back. They're addictive. Foods that are genetically modified really, really fail our bodies and disturb our gut. They produce a lot of inflammation and allergenic responses. We fail our bodies by eating too much and by eating too fast. So there are four main areas of what our gut does. And the first one is digestion. The second one is elimination. And then microflora balance is
because you're a Met fan. Well, the Yankees didn't do
I'm still in mourning.
Hold on.
I've been in mourning for about 8 days.
Let me figure out how to mute this. Cheryl, how to do that? Okay, sorry. Can everyone go ahead and mute themselves? So microflora balance is also known as microbiome. And then the gut integrity, that's really the integrity of our small intestine, because that's where absorption and assimilation really occurs. So how do I achieve health in all these areas? There are also kind of 4 areas, they call them the 4 R's of GI health. And first, we might need to remove some things like food allergens or toxins, and then maybe removing certain organisms like parasites or bacteria like H. pylori or C. diff, things like that. So we have to remove the things that are bothersome or in excess in our gut. Then replacement is usually part of it, and that means like replacing stomach acids or enzymes. Then re-inoculation is just kind of another word for replacing, and usually that's replacing with probiotics. And then repair is always a part of it also, and that means repairing sometimes the mucus lining, the villi, maybe reducing inflammation and helping our liver to function, because that's actually part of digestion also. So let's take, this is a nice simplified view. We take in some food, and here's an example of a carrot. We chew it, and we want to chew it really, really well, because we don't want our food to be big particles. We want them to be tiny, tiny, tiny particles. The food then goes to our stomach, and our stomach acids really break down the food, and especially protein. Now, the stomach acids also break down calcium, iron, and zinc. And so really, really important for other aspects of our health. Zinc is really important for our immune system, calcium very important for our bones, for example, and iron so we don't get anemias. Once it passes from the stomach, then our stomach acids actually trigger other digestive enzymes to be released, and bile from the gallbladder. So without good stomach acid, we don't get the signals to the rest of the digestion. In fact, if we don't have good stomach acid, the rest of our digestion just really does not occur very well at all. And I want you to think about it. Many people are on proton pump inhibitors, which are things like Prilosec and Nexium. And it might give us some short-term relief, but it's really very damaging to all of digestion. And so once these things occur, then food is what I call ready for inspection. It's in the small intestine. And this is an example of our small intestine, and it's really 1 cell thick. So it's a very thin layer, and we have many cells, and they're all lined up right next to each other, and they're called tight junctions. Everything's very close and tight next to each other. Then they also have little fingers, as you can see on the top. Those are called villi, and that gives us a lot more area for absorption. And so then the blue layer, it says a probiotic biofilm, or it's a mucus layer also. So we've got really many aspects to this very thin 1 cell layer, which is our small intestine. And so if everything is working perfectly, we've got food that's digested and it is presented, and then it actually crosses through the cells, not between the cells, but through the cells. And then just as a nice representation, it is then transformed through the cells and turns into a heart, let's just say, to represent it. Now, the little green circles with the pluses, those are that's our immune system. And so it recognizes this as something, as a nutrient and a food. And so it's going to then carry it to the liver and then to every other cell. And so this is in the perfect world, how things should look. And it's kind of like, we're being screened and processed, but it's not always a foolproof process. And let me show you some of the things that can happen. We actually lose barrier integrity by these things. Antibiotics. And, many people say, well, I haven't had antibiotics in a long time. However, the biggest use of antibiotics in this country is in animal feed. And so it goes into our beef and pork. It doesn't go into chicken anymore. I think that stopped a few years ago. But we get exposure to antibiotics just through meat, to be honest. Bad foods, such as fried foods and genetically modified foods, bad drinks, and to be honest, alcohol is one of those. It's very damaging to the intestinal integrity. Various germs are very damaging, and stress. Stress is a big, big factor. And I think most of us do have a fair amount of stress. And so what happens? Well, first of all, the nice blue probiotic mucus layer gets destroyed or damaged. We get breaks, the cells, rather than being close together, we get gaps, or the tight junctions have now disappeared. And even then the villi, because even one round of antibiotics, our villi can break off in half. So just one round of antibiotics can really affect the absorption of food. And then what happens is food, these particles can then migrate through this, between the cells, and not really through the cells where they're really actually processed properly. And so they migrate through, and then they actually become something that the system doesn't recognize. And so as a result, the immune system tags it as an intruder. Okay, so something that should have been a nutrient is now tagged as an intruder. And our immune system is activated. And it wants to attack them because it doesn't recognize it as food. And then we get into this whole process of what's called increased intestinal permeability, or some people call it leaky gut. And all of these things listed, these can be stressors, and these can be things that then migrate through the cells, or between the cells, and it causes even further intestinal barrier dysfunction. And so what happens, the body then starts to label certain foods, for example, as a food allergy. And it says, I don't recognize you, you're not fully digested, or you're not in the form you should be. And so the immune system starts to attack it. And every time we eat it, we start to get some symptoms. And if that isn't bad enough, when it goes on long enough, we start getting other immune abnormalities. Because really our immune system, we want to save it for the big things. We want to save it for fighting cancer and really serious things. And we don't want our immune system to be simply attacking food. Food should be used as a nutrient and not as a foreign object. But we get to that point, and the system is in overdrive then. And it starts, beyond attacking food, it starts to attack our own cells, because the messaging starts to get very confused. And really the whole immune system is just at a ramped up, highly inflammatory state then. And that all is, again, with increased intestinal permeability. And so we literally have like a war going on inside our body. So truly, when we say heal your gut, heal your body, that's because this inflammatory response literally starts in the gut and right in the bloodstream beyond the gut. And inflammation is responsible for all of the diseases that you see here: cardiovascular, cancer, pulmonary, neurologic, autoimmune, arthritis, diabetes, Alzheimer's. These are all inflammatory diseases. And so if we can heal our gut, then we have a chance of reversing and changing and not going down the paths of all of these really debilitating diseases. I used to give talks, and I would tell people about, if you had an expensive car, and I don't really know of any inexpensive cars, but let's say you had a Lamborghini, you would certainly want to take care of it, house it well, and certainly put the right fuel in it. And, I used to tell people, if you put kerosene in your car, you wouldn't even get off of the gas station parking lot. Well, our bodies are such miracles that we fuel them incorrectly all the time, and they still keep functioning. And so we keep fueling them incorrectly. And then in our later years, sometimes we're really paying the piper. And so we need to know now that we should fuel our bodies well, And you know what I also tell people, food doesn't just fuel our body, it rebuilds the body. And so it's even more important than this gasoline example. This is just an example of, you know, even water put into a car, it's just simply the wrong fuel, even under other situations, like it's the right fuel for our body. Now, similarly, certain foods, even common foods like wheat or dairy, might just be the wrong fuel for you. And we're finding that in a lot of cases. And I'll explain why. You know, we learned in a lot of my nutrition classes that in Japan, the biggest allergen is rice. And that's because they eat a lot of rice. That's really, you know, that's their main grain. Well, here in the US, we are a wheat-based society. You know, I used to eat wheat 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and even more. You know, that is our grain of choice, if you will, and corn's a very close second, to be honest. But we eat a lot of wheat. And so in Japan, the biggest allergen is rice. And here in the US, one of the most common allergens is wheat. So something to pay attention to. And we find, or you may find, that removing certain allergenic foods can make a huge difference. I'll give you an example of that a little bit later. And so what happens, as I described earlier, I mean, food literally suddenly becomes, rather than a nutrient, it is the enemy. And the body is mounting a defense against some of our foods. And so we start having adverse reactions to foods, and those might be a true allergy or just what's called an IgG sensitivity or an intolerance. And this just gives you an example, literally kind of as we wage a war with these forces, our body has different systems that are fighting this perceived enemy. So, you know, most of us know about these really extreme food reactions like peanuts or lobster. And usually, I mean, these may provoke an anaphylactic reaction in people and literally life-threatening. Most food sensitivities, though, most food reactions are non-anaphylactic, and it's kind of good and bad. It's good because they're not life-threatening, but it's bad because the symptoms are more vague. And the symptoms take sometimes anywhere from 2 hours to 2 days to show up.
Oh,
And
here we
so
go. I'm trying to be in 2 places. What?
mute yourself, Cheryl. Thanks. Sorry, that's my sister. I can talk to her that way. So sometimes it's really hard to figure out. I mean, you know, if you get hives upon eating strawberries, you know immediately. But with many of these, the symptoms are delayed, and it might be a few days. Well, try to figure out everything you've eaten in 2 days. It's pretty hard. And these are some of the symptoms. They can be very vague. I mean, it might even be insomnia. It might be arthritis. It might be headaches. It might be circles under your eyes, eczema. You know, I would say it's pretty common for sometimes women will bring their children and they'll say, you know, my son's constipated. And the very first thing I look for are food sensitivities. So constipation or eczema in little kids, I always think of food sensitivities. So another that's not on here is like ADHD. We can have, you know, behavioral issues, or even, you know, it shows here depression and anxiety. So there are many symptoms that you would not think that would be related to a food sensitivity, but they can be. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the R's is removal. So we want to remove allergens. We also want to remove bacteria, parasites, etc. But when it comes to food allergens, you know, we want to identify them and maybe have to do some testing, figure out what they are. So when it comes to food sensitivities, one thing, you know, skin prick testing is one, intradermal testing is another, blood test, stool test, or elimination diets. I will share, there are, I've seen some skin prick blood tests, but I'm finding that they're not as reliable. even with some serum tests, many of the blood tests that are done, they only test for raw foods. Well, cooking literally changes foods a great deal. And so if you're only testing for raw foods, it doesn't give you a very full picture. And so there's one company that I do tend to use, and they test raw and cooked foods, which again really gives a much better picture for allergy testing. But one thing you can do on your own is called an elimination diet. And it's really pretty simple. You avoid these common allergens, and you have to avoid them totally, 100%, for, and I say at least 3 weeks, so 3 to 4 weeks. And then after that, you bring one food in at a time, and you will have a very clear response if it's problematic. You know, if you had headaches before, it will kind of really talk to you with a vengeance. So it's very, very clear. So some of these foods, these are the most common. Eggs, these are what you have to avoid in the elimination diet. Egg, dairy, all nuts, shellfish, soy, all soy products, wheat, any gluten product, corn, beef, tomatoes, citrus, and pork. These are the main ones, and you may decide that's pretty hard to do. So the beauty of this is it doesn't cost anything. It's, you know, you can do it. If that seems too hard, then the other allergy tests can be done. But some of those tests can be $300 to $400. So just, you know, just to let you know. So, you know, we want to, again, eliminate bacteria, parasites, any food allergens, because those trigger the immune response. And then we also want to help to increase what I call the outgoing garbage. And as a little explanation, this is elimination process. So we are eliminating allergens, toxins, and other harmful organisms. And how do we do it? Well, the 4 organs listed, those are our main detoxifying organs: colon, kidney, skin, and liver. You know, so we want our large intestine or our colon, we want things moving. Because if we're not having good regular bowel movements, toxins are reabsorbed. And so, you know, we don't want that. That adds just further toxic load. We want our kidneys working well. So that means drink plenty of water, and that means, you know, avoiding ibuprofen, because that literally very quickly affects our kidneys. You may not realize it, but our skin is a great detoxifying organ. And we detoxify by perspiring. So that's one great reason for exercise. Also, saunas and steam rooms are good. It really encourages us to sweat. And so that's just another means of detoxifying. Our liver is, you know, it is one of our prime detoxifiers. And what happens, our liver, you know, first it's kind of a security guard, and foods and other toxins go to our liver. You see all the blood vessels that come from the colon and even the small intestine, and they pull things right into the liver. And so first it's kind of a screening process, and it might then dump things out into lymphatic to be removed. And then it starts what's called phase 1 or 2 conjugation. And that is actually how we convert toxins into a water-based form that we can then urinate out. So taking care of our liver, you know, again, means eating well. B vitamins are really key. Avoiding acetaminophen, which is very damaging to the liver, and, you know, minimal alcohol, which is, you know, pretty hard on the liver. So we do want to take care of our disposal system, and we don't always think of all of these things, but they really all work together. So some other things you can do. You want to eat like a bird, small and often, and try to eat based on hunger cues. And that means not when you're sad or angry or, you know, lonely. So just really try to pay attention. Am I truly hungry? And then you can eat. And attempt to eat less overall. Maybe have a goal of just eating 20% less than you normally do. One reason for that is I've been told that 75% of our energy is used digesting food. So if we if we have less food to digest, and really help our body by taking enzymes, then we have more energy to do other things like heal our body. We also want to eat in a very mindful way. That means slow down and really pay attention. Again, chewing is the first step of digesting. So chew your food well and just slow down. And, when you take a bite of food, take your fork and then put it down. Set it down and really chew your food. And then you may pick it up again and take in another bite. Really savor your food and the flavor, and really be aware that food isn't just to fill your body. It's there to rebuild and to help your body heal. And so food, you need to view it in a little different way. Have a different relationship with food. Avoid multitasking. And I tell people especially, don't read and don't watch the TV, don't watch news. Boy, talk about something that would really halt your digestion, is watching the news while you're trying to eat. So now music, I think, is okay, to be honest, but no news and no TV. Now, let me talk for a minute about, most people think of our gut health and, they feel if they go to the bathroom once a day that they're okay. Well, that's really just plumbing, food in and food out. That's just plumbing. Although, bowel movements can give us a good sign. If you have diarrhea, if you have constipation, those are not normal and they're not healthy. So don't just chalk it up to that's normal and that's me. Other things like, for example, if you have bloating, especially like bloating just a few minutes after you eat, those are signs you may have SIBO. That's called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it's something that's we've really only recognized, I'd say, in the last 10 years or so, but it's fairly common. In fact, they estimate 15% of the elderly actually have SIBO. There's something called H. pylori, and it causes ulcers in our stomach. And 50% of the whole world population has H. pylori, so it's very, very common. It's obtained from raw chicken, to be honest. 80% of all people diagnosed with IBS actually have SIBO. So there's just a lot we're learning about that. Or, getting back to our stools again, if your stools are light in color or they float, it might be a sign of a gallbladder problem. Another sign of a gallbladder problem might be nausea. So there are many signs of, that let us know that maybe your GI tract isn't doing what it should be doing, or isn't as healthy as it could be. So some other things, how you can help your body. Eat real food, eat clean food. You've probably heard this phrase, but I do tell people to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. You have vegetables, you have then meat, and then dairy and eggs and dairy if you can tolerate it. Some years ago, I'm not a vegetarian, but I have moved in that direction. And, meat is harder to digest. Meat also makes our body more acidic. And so plants make our body more alkaline, and we're actually much healthier in an alkaline state. So move in that direction. You don't have to be totally a vegetarian, but it's really healthier for our body. And then certainly avoiding the foods that are, known allergens for you. I don't know if any of you know Michael Pollan. He's an author. I really like a lot of his books. He has kind of a simple phrase, and it's eat food, not too much, and mostly plants. And it's just kind of a nice, very succinct way of saying how we should all be eating. The Mediterranean diet is something that's really probably good for all of us, and it's an anti-inflammatory diet, and it just has a lot more good fats, coming from like fish, flax, chia seeds, olive oil, and avoiding the bad fats. And corn oil and soybean oil are really to be avoided, and most salad dressings are soybean oil. But soy and corn are the two genetically modified, highly genetically modified. And so we really want to avoid those. And then the same with what are called trans fats, because they actually create holes in every cell membrane. And so very damaging to our health. We want to avoid fried foods. And, you know, most baked goods use very cheap fats, a lot of sugar, and, you know, they just tend to not be so healthy for us. Another little tidbit is to manage your meals. They say a good way is to eat breakfast like a king. In other words, your biggest meal at breakfast. Eat lunch like a queen, and maybe dinner like a pauper. And so it kind of looks like the green triangle. So eat more, you know, eat more in the morning. And so focus on the quality of the foods you're eating, and then the quantity. So in general, less, and the timing. And I think eating less in the evening will probably even be helpful for your sleep, for example. So, so those are some, you know, some gems. You know, another, what I'm going to do now is just do a very quick recap, because, you know, our gut health and just really, and how it gets disturbed is really key. So our digestive tract really starts from our mouth and it goes all the way down to our anus. And so we want to choose really good, healthy foods. We want to eat and slowly and chew our foods really, really well. We want to add enzymes. Most of us need some enzymes and stomach acid, to be very honest. If you're taking something like Prilosec or Nexium, you really want to find a better way to deal with that, because that is shutting down your digestion. We then want to look at the things that disturb our gut. And as a quick recap, those are antibiotics, alcohol, genetically modified foods, and stress. So we want to minimize those. If certain foods bother you, then you may have some food sensitivities, and I really suggest finding out what those are and minimizing those. And there are some stool tests that can be done. There are other things to determine food sensitivities, but if there's any pathogens or any food allergens, those need to be eliminated, and then we can start actually doing certain things to repair your gut. Repair the things that the antibiotics and genetically modified foods and stress have caused. And we can do that. That can be reversed, but only if we're aware of how we're damaging those and be committed to working on those. So functional medicine really, it's really combining Eastern and Western medicine and really looking at the body as a whole. And realizing, what we've done, what we've done to our food, and just assuming that all foods in the grocery store are healthy is not it's not an accurate or a safe place, to function. And so realizing what can disturb our gut, and then how that can really affect all of our health is very important. Now, and this is kind of a strange phrase at first. It says, the world is round and the place which may seem like the end may also be only the beginning. And the message there is, some people hear this and think, oh my gosh, I can't, there's no way I could do all of this. And yet, once people make some changes to their diet, and once people make some changes and heal their gut, they begin to realize just how good they can feel, and maybe changing and avoiding going down the path of severe rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, even lupus and MS, and even maybe dementia, because we found gut health and brain health are very much linked. So it's a path that is very worthwhile. And if you take care of your gut, you will be taking care of your health. Okay. if there are any questions, feel free to unmute and ask any questions. Let's see. Any questions, anyone? Do I have to unmute you? Or is there anything I can further explain? Can you hear me? Okay. You know, I'll share a few other gems. We tend to be sensitive, or we tend to crave foods that we have a sensitivity to. And, you know, I'll give you an example. My son, when we did some testing on him years ago, he showed up sensitive to wheat, dairy, and tomato. Well, guess what he craved? Pizza. And he would eat pizza 3 times a day, 7 days a week, if we let him. And he was only 8, and so we could alter his diet and we could remove all of those things. And, you know, truly in about 3 weeks' time, my son was a different child. So I saw firsthand how changing the diet and removing food allergens made a difference. And that's when actually we were able to take him off of Ritalin. I mean, these foods disturbed him so much that, I mean, they made him hyperactive. And so that was a life-changing thing for him and our whole family. So that's just an example of how changing foods can really make a difference. And, you know, interestingly, after he had been off of those foods, and this was about 3 months into it, and he had a friend over, and I thought, well, we'll buy some donuts. You know, they deserve a treat. And so he took 1 bite of a donut and he put it down and he said, that tastes really gross, which, you know, for a kid to say that, it was quite shocking. So, but getting back to the main message, many times if you crave a food, that's a good sign you might be sensitive to it, because it triggers a cycle where it literally can create some brain chemicals that make us feel good, and then we kind of crash, and then we crave that food again because we want that same good feeling. So if you crave a food, that might just be a sign that you could be sensitive to that very food. Does that happen with anybody? Okay.
Dr. Shea,
Yes.
would you go back to the part about the how the immune system works, how it becomes our enemy, kind of? I don't know exactly what you said at the beginning. You didn't say that, I'm sure, but
I said something like
how
that.
it works against us, yeah.
And I don't know that the slide, let me just see, maybe I can go back to that slide, at least it'll give a picture of it. Okay, so when we start to lose intestinal integrity, and you know what that means is our mucus lining can become destroyed. We get spaces between our small intestine cells, and so things can migrate through. And these things can be like undigested food, certain antibodies. They can be even bacteria and viruses. There's something called lipopolysaccharides, and to be honest, I think they are kind of side effects of different inflammatory responses in the gut, but all of these things can then migrate through. But when I started to use a food example, you know, they cross through and they're not fully digested. In other words, like proteins should be digested into peptides or amino acids, and oils should be broken down into smaller oils. But when they're larger and not fully digested, and then they cross through the barrier, then the body doesn't recognize them. and the immune system does not recognize them. And really, our immune system, it is designed, it's trying to differentiate between what we call self and non-self. So it's like, no, this is our skin, that's okay. Or, you know, this is this is a bone and this is a muscle, but no, this is a large piece of food and I don't recognize it. And so the immune system starts to attack anything that it doesn't recognize as your self. Excuse me. And so it starts to attack it and wanting to destroy it. And then, with repeated occurrences, then, it's like the immune system just gets very, very ramped up. And it gets to the point where it's fighting everything. And then it gets also confused about, again, our own cells. In fact, we can have autoimmune reactions to almost any part of our body. Like if our body starts attacking our joints, that's called rheumatoid arthritis. If our body starts attacking the fat lining around our nerves, that is MS or multiple sclerosis. If our body starts attacking our thyroid, that's called Hashimoto's. That's a very common hypothyroid. So our body, we can actually have antibodies develop to almost anything in our body, and our body can start attacking all kinds of things. But those are some of the most common autoimmune. But yes, the immune system gets confused after just repeated having to fight things that it shouldn't be fighting, to be honest. Is that clarifying?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any question, Marion? She disappeared.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Okay.
I'm just listening.
Okay. I do think, foods are a big issue, and then really just looking at what disturbs our gut. And I have a phrase that I use, and I say that our food has been altered without our knowledge or permission. And that's really the case. And there have been things that have been, are very damaging to our system, and we haven't realized it until some of the damage is done. And it can be reversed. It takes some work, but it can be reversed, and it's worthwhile doing. It's very much worthwhile doing. I may send you, I don't know my next talk. It's really going to be about our immune system and colds and flu. And I believe it's going to be on November 8th. So I'll send you all a reminder. And if you'd like, I'll go ahead and send you a recording of this if you have any interest. Okay, if there are no other questions, I will figure out how to exit. Maybe.
I thought of some.
Okay.
Is omeprazole one of those things that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, and what about Tylenol and acetaminophen are both bad?
Well, Tylenol is hard on the liver.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard on the liver. Very much. And it also tends to destroy that mucus lining of our gut. So, as does ibuprofen. Ibuprofen is harder on the kidney. But they both very much irritate the lining of the gut.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Great.
So if people are on omeprazole, there are things we can do. There's some better pathways to avoid that, that solution. Okay.
Well, the cool part is my doctor told me I could stop taking it today.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So if you have if some symptoms reappear, there are some ways that we can deal with that. Okay.
Oh, cool. Okay, great.
Yeah, my doctor took me off of omeprazole because of kidney issues.
I had forgotten that. And you know, when omeprazole first came out, though, I mean, it was on the listings from the pharmacy. It said, do not take this for more than 2 weeks. But people have been on it for years and years. And you know, one really important thing is we found that women that are on like omeprazole for very long, they have much higher rates of osteoporosis because it's stopping the ability to break down calcium. So I tell people if you're on omeprazole, just stop. I wouldn't even bother with taking calcium because you're wasting your money. So there are lots of other side effects. And so it's just, you know, it's better to find another way around that. It's kind of a short-term solution with really long-term damage, you know, to the whole digestive tract. Yeah. Good questions.
I think I don't have any more.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time.
Wait.
That's
But,
okay.
oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned omeprazole and I missed somehow. What's that for and what do people take it for?
People take it for heartburn or acid reflux. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. If I could figure out how to close out this meeting, I would do it.
The bottom right.
Are you the host?
I am.
Okay, if you click on your screen, it should say end. Like
Or
down
where
at the
it's-
bottom, the right-hand bottom.
The usual
right.
screen. Okay.
Oh, turn off the recording first. And see if it'll show up then.
You know what? It came up now. Okay, I'm going to say
Cool.
goodbye. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
Thank you, Dr. Shea.
you're welcome.